In the final chapter of my FE7 Meh Units Only Ironman, we once again enter the Dragon's Gate to confront Nurgle in a final showdown. But Nurgle has prepared the Mega Man equivalent of a boss rush by parading around the bodies of all the previous Black Fang members our army had previously beaten, like some sort of sick marionette. These units have also been souped up to better scale into the late game and carry several weapons that are pseudo-legendary in nature. They have enough power to actually hurt Nurgle if for some reason your lords are insanely underleveled and cannot directly face Nurgle with the legendary weapons they have. You also get access to Athos, the 1,000-plus-year-old Archsage, who is insanely strong and acts as a god unit on this final chapter as a final failsafe. Normally, you could have Athos solo everything on this chapter, but I decided that wouldn't really be in the flavor of my challenge run, so I took all his weapons away and gave him 5 support staves instead, allowing my army to actually cross the finish line themselves. And as stated previously, this chapter acts as a boss rush, where chambers open up, turn by turn, until all the units are defeated, allowing us access to the final chamber that Nurgle is hiding in. The layout of the map is as follows, and the numbers on the map correlate to the turn the doorways open, with each room featuring a boss duo or a boss and some high-level promoted enemies. But before we can get into our approach for this map, I would like to take the opportunity to show the final team I came up with for this chapter, and go through their final stat check and equipment, with a couple extra notes on each unit to either give reasoning for the choice, or my overall reluctance to bring them in the first place. Starting off with our mandatory deployments, we have Hector, our main lord, who I have given 2 speed wings to, and has also gotten a couple of good levels, giving him actual competitive stats. He may not be able to solo much, but he can hold his own in a fight. Nils is next on the list, and he supports us with his rings and refresh ability. Very useful. Ellawood, who had some really good early levels to allow him to be a reliable frontliner, has unfortunately had some bad later levels, and he's unfortunately now the weakest of my 3 lords. The last lord, Lynn, really came into her own and got a lot of important stat checks with maxed out speed and good overall bulk and damage output. I even gave her one of the body rings to allow her to make use of her overly heavy legendary weapon, the Soul Cotty, allowing her to still double important targets and not be doubled herself. The last mandatory unit being Athos, which as stated previously is a god unit we have banished to staff duty. And then we have the first actual unit I choose to deploy, which is in this case a familiar face you all know, Nino. She really underperformed in her magic stat, but she can still be useful as a secondary staff unit with some subpar damage capabilities. Next up after that, of course, we have to have the GIGACHAD himself, Oswin, with an impressive stat spread as our main frontliner. One thing to note is that Oswin has 4 more resistance than average Oswins do, without even accounting for the talisman I gave him earlier. If I gave him a second talisman and barrier staff him, he would have 30 in both defense types, as a general. He truly lives up to his walking fortress reputation. We of course have to also include Sarah in the final team as well, for her consistent damage output and great utility as a staff unit. Followed closely by our Berserker, Dart. Not much needs to be said, he isn't super tanky, but if you need something dead, he will most likely get the job done with his strong and fast hits. We then have Kanas, who is our final staff user, and the only unit that can make use of the Lunatome if we need it. He doesn't really have anything outstanding to him, but he is consistent. Our second to last member is Wrath, who has had a very mediocre run of levels throughout the campaign, but he can use a longbow and provides valuable maneuverability and chip damage when necessary. And of course, I couldn't end this run without our star pupil, my beloved Will. He has been the epitome of consistency, and showing up absolutely when it matters every time without exception. The man literally wills crits into existence. Get it? Because his name is Will? Sorry about that. Let's get into this final chapter. One more final tip before we start tearing through this last hurdle is that you cannot use the formation mechanic on this map, as the placement is predetermined based on the unit order on your deployment tab. A very niche mechanic, but you can just organize it using this map as a reference and selecting units in the order you want them. It isn't super important, but it can catch people off guard. That being said, we start off by warping Dart and Will to wall off Uhai and the other snipers from being able to move or retaliate, as he only has the Rheinfleck bow to attack with. We then make use of our longbows from Lin and Raph to pick off the first sniper and have Dart cleave down the second sniper before moving Oswin over to complete the seal and give us time to deal with Uhai safely. But Oswin just crits him, giving us the bow for Will to use and plenty of time to now reorganize our army. But don't be fooled by the text of the weapon. It says it allows you to attack consecutively, like a brave bow, but that doesn't make it an actual brave bow, as it turns out to be a mistranslation when it was ported over to the English dub. Next up is the Kenneth Room to the northwest, who is accompanied by a Sage and Druid. The Sage has a bolting tome, and the other two operate on defensive AI, so a common strategy is to leave those two for last to have better positioning for the end of the chapter, and kill off the Sage whenever it's feasible. I choose to just tank boltings for the first few turns because I can barrier staff all the low resistance units that would have trouble, and it's just better that way for us. The next room that opens is Brendan Reed's room to the west, carrying the Basilicos axe, which is almost as effective as the Arman's, and with Brendan's 30 strength, he can do upwards of 52 damage per attack, which I figured could easily be tanked by Oswin, which he can do, but I did not realize that Brendan had enough speed to double Oswin here, resulting in him taking 44 damage, followed by an additional 10 damage from the Silverbow Warrior behind him. At this point, I was dumbfounded that I made such a mediocre mistake, and figured it was only a matter of time that the Bolting Sage would punish my mistake with one final hit to kill Oswin. But he misses, and Oswin can live to fight another day, absorbing the equivalent of 144 unmitigated damage without dying. What a man! We immediately get Oswin out of danger and heal him, while Will finishes Brendan off, and Dart and Nino clear out the Silverbow Warrior. Darren and a second general then appear in the eastern room equipped with the best lance in the game, the Rex Hosta. But they are both quite durable and require our lords to keep them in place for a turn to allow our team to reposition and heal up. Which Hector and Ellawood do fine with, but Ellawood is literally dealing 0 damage against Darren. So Oswin once again has to step in and slowly bring down the beefy general. The turn passes, opening up the southwest chamber, which has Ursula carrying the Excalibur tome and Jerme using a rune sword. The Sage from earlier also moved up too close, allowing Dart to deal with the bumbling Sage without alerting Kenneth or the Druid. Ursula, on the other hand, is quite scary, but Will can double her and remove the threat immediately. Thanks, man. Appreciate you. Jerme proceeds to also move up to attack Will, while I position my army for the last room of enemies, and he is just a joke compared to all the other threats on the map, dealing only 7 damage to our famed sniper, and almost dying in the process. We finish him off using Nino, and we now have to deal with Lloyd and Linus in the northeast chamber. These two deal quite a large amount of damage together, making tanking their attacks a little tricky. Even if you do block off the doorway, Linus can use a tomahawk to attack from 2 range, while Lloyd uses his regal sword for high damage. We do of course lean on Oswin to hold the line, but I noticed something a bit devious. Linus has no real dodge chance against a sleep staff, so I knock him unconscious, while Oswin once again crits and absolutely decimates Lloyd off the face of the earth. With the reinforcements dealt with, I have the army collapse on the sleeping Linus and shortly after reunite him with his brother. That sleep staff got me thinking though. how are the dodge chances for Kenneth and the Druid? And as expected, it is very high for Kenneth. But it turns out the Druid is helpless against Aphos' sleep shenanigans, allowing us to deal with Kenneth's Luce Tome with relative ease and leave Nino to eventually kill the Druid when the party is ready to move to the last chamber. Once we are positioned, we enter Nurgle's chamber, which has another Druid and Sage supporting him. But oftentimes you can just ignore them and just focus Nurgle. So long as you know you can kill him on enemy phase, you will kill him before they can back him up, as the boss always attacks first. Theoretically, I could have done just that, but I wanted to send a message and delete everything this man has created for the hours of hell he has put me through. So I clear out his lackeys with relative ease, and eventually get him down to his last few hit points, deciding to use our weakest martial unit, Wrath, to finish off the crazed Archdruid. But wait, why aren't the credits rolling? It turns out, in Nurgle's final moments, he used his remaining power to unleash fire dragons upon the land of Aleve once more. We of course are panicking, as their sheer presence is terrifying. But in a true Deus Ex Machina moment, Bramamon brings Ninian back to us, resulting in her using her latent ice dragon powers to pacify the 3 dragons trying to invade the land. This causes her to fall unconscious after successfully stopping 2 of them. With that, our objective is clear. We must defeat the last remaining dragon. To be honest though, this last section is a victory lap, as they place you almost right on top of the dragon, making the supporting sages and druids practically useless, as we can just stay out of range of them, since the dragon doesn't move and just attacks whatever is in their 3-range breath attack. Which is weird, because Ellawood's version of the map, which is the easier storyline, requires you to cross the bridge and more actively deal with the magical units. Games are just weird sometimes, man. In any case, the dragon itself has 120 HP and can do 38 to 40 piercing damage depending on what stats it rolls. With a speed stat of 17, any unit at or below 13 speed cannot fight the dragon, which admittedly doesn't really affect us, but a few of our units cannot take that much piercing damage. So for the most part, we leave the attacks to our Lord's units and slowly chip away at its health bar. We then decide who will close out the campaign, which at first I thought would be Will, but after Oswin's performance this entire campaign, I decided to give him his moment in the spotlight. With the dragon dealt with, we go through the ending of the game. Thanks to my supports with Ninian, she stays behind with Ellawood instead of entering the portal with Nils and leaving the realm of Aleve. Hector and Lynn also get together due to my supports. Yay! A good old sappy happy ending. And as I sit here going through the end credits and seeing how far our little ragtag group got even through my more questionable decision making, I am content. I accomplished my Ironman with a rule set that I'm truly happy with. And I hope you all are happy with the journey as well. I have stated multiple times, I did take inspiration from... Gosh dang it, Canas. I didn't expect you to be that inept when it came to snow. Like I was saying, I was inspired to make this series by Excelblem, who is actively doing his own challenge runs right now. But along with thanking him, I want to thank the Fire Emblem community that helped shape this run, like the tactical geniuses Dawn and Mecha, to the more silly guys like Excelblem and Bismix. There are, of course, many others that could be named here. I just don't know them all. But I most importantly want to thank you all for watching. I would greatly appreciate it if you would subscribe for more content such as this, or find me on my Twitch streams where I stream every weekend, Friday to Sunday, at 7 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time. This is Tilted Gaming, signing off. And until next time, guys, peace out.